Hello, and welcome to this talk from the Gwent Whole School Approach to Emotional Wellbeing. We recently presented at a conference with the Division of Educational and Child Psychology on towards a whole school approach to emotional wellbeing, the 5 components of wellbeing and how they can make a difference to tomorrow's teens. We thought it might be useful to record this talk and share this on our Twitter page. So here we go. It's really nice to have a chance to discuss our work at this stage of the project. We're here today, we're going to talk about 5 components of wellbeing that when we spoke to our school communities across Gwent, seem to be crucial in meeting the emotional wellbeing needs of pupils, families and school staff. And then we're going to talk about our subsequent work with school clusters to think about how we embed these across whole schools and clusters so that they become part of the lived experience for everyone. My name is Ian Smillie and I'm Senior Educational Psychologist on the Gwent Whole School Approach to Wellbeing.
And I'm Charlotte Montgomery. I'm a clinical psychologist with the team.
And as we've already said, we're part of the multidisciplinary Gwent Whole School Approach to Emotional Wellbeing team. We're a team of clinical and educational psychologists that sit within a wider partnership approach to joining up thinking and practice across health and education to make a difference for young people and their families in terms of wellbeing. The Gwent Whole School Approach to Emotional Wellbeing is a pilot project designed to explore how systems can work together to create school context that meet the wellbeing needs of everyone. We're working with clusters of schools using a package of training and the use of an inquiry model to support them to construct their own whole school approaches to emotional wellbeing in the hope that this will make a tangible, felt difference to children and young people across their school career and also, of course, to families and school staff as well. From the very beginning of the project, we have worked to place the voices of school communities at the centre of our work and the centre of the development of our project. Much of our presentation today is shaped by these voices, and we have left much of the research literature and theory to the side, and we hope that's okay. We're hoping to share some key principles that have guided us in the development of our work thus far, and to consider what this might mean for wider practice as applied psychologists working with schools. We haven't approached today from an expert position. We're on a learning journey with this project, and our greatest hope is that some of these insights that we have gained are of value to wider thinking about practice, but there's no doubt that we'll continue to learn as we go. The first principle that we wanted to speak to was one that's felt incredibly important to us and continues to shape the work of the project, and that's the need to connect with school communities at the beginning of the process in a way that is curious and authentic and creates the space for dialogue. This connection with school communities in those initial stages for the project involved going out to interview pupils, families and school staff about their well-being experiences in school contexts and about what was making the difference to them. We happened to take a film crew along with us and a film for schools about the elements of well-being in whole school approaches was created. We wanted to share this quote that you can see on the screen, which was one of the thoughts shared on a visit to one of the schools by a pupil, and actually by a number of pupils at different points through the filming process. And this became a concept, this concept rather became a powerful metaphor for us. So we're hoping that during the time that we have with you in this presentation, that we can present a snapshot into the work that we've been doing alongside our school communities in Gwent. We've got permission to share the stories and the images of the pupils, parents and school staff that we met, and we'll do our best to represent those today. We actually met over 130 pupils, parents and staff in these initial exploratory stages of our work, and the stories have stayed with us and informed the development of this project. Stories about the differences that school communities make in meeting the wellbeing needs of their members, whether they're pupils, parents or staff. And importantly, these are often the smallest things, the things that can easily be overlooked, but which make the biggest difference. They were stories that made us smile, stories that made us think, and stories that moved us immensely. Themes emerged from these stories, of which we'll say more later. But many of the pupils, like the one above, spoke of falling and knowing that they would be picked up and taken care of. This was often a physical act after an accident on the yard, for example, but a powerful metaphor for the difference that a school community can make towards well-being and a powerful steer for the work of our project. How do we develop school communities that are there to catch us when we fall? Because we all fall. It may not be a physical fall, but things happen in our lives that affect how we feel and how we're doing. We asked school communities how school made a difference to their well-being. One such story was shared by a young man that we met. He came to see us on the day that we visited his school, and when he arrived, he was accompanied by 2 LSAs and a class teacher. Even before hearing and knowing his story, I was struck by the show of love, care and support that the presence of these staff implied. He was from a single parent family, but sadly and tragically, his story was that his mother had died unexpectedly. His whole life completely changed. He cried as he told me this, and I offered that he did not have to do this if he didn't want to, but he was clear, adamant, if you like. He wanted it to be known about the differences that the relationships in his school had made. How school staff had come to visit him to check in on him, how he felt supported and cared for, how he was valued, how he knew that he was being held in mind, and how his needs were noticed and met. All of these acts combining to enable him to keep attending school, to keep seeing his friends that were so important to him, and to stay with his school family. Things that were making such a profound difference to him at such a difficult time in his life. This meeting led me to reflect upon how in times like those, as adults working with children, we can feel overwhelmed by what we feel we should be doing. We can feel uncertain about what to do or whether we are qualified to do it. And we can be drawn towards a perceived need for expertise or to experts who can support our children and young people, counsellors or psychologists, for example. There'll always, of course, be a place for these more specialist interventions. However, what was making the most profound difference to this young person was actually the support that he received through the existing relationships that were of most importance to him. The genuine experiences of love, care and support offered on a daily basis, and the containment offered by this familiarity. For us as a team, an important question emerges as a result. What might this mean for our work as psychologists working into school communities?
And it was stories like the one that Ian's just shared that enabled us to develop our understanding of what is really making the difference to wellbeing within school communities. We took quite a deliberate decision to start afresh with this, as Ian's alluded to leave our academic understanding of wellbeing at the door for that moment so that we could connect with real stories from real people currently connected with school communities about what matters to them, what's making the difference for them. Through the creation of the film, we were able to capture over 130 people's voices and explore the common themes that arose in relation to wellbeing at school. We were then able to connect that back to the literature reviews and the existing research in order to develop an understanding of 5 central components of wellbeing that you see here before you, that of belonging, of agency, of efficacy, of love, and of safety. Some of the people that we'll meet today through the stories we're sharing will illustrate these components for us. So we'd like to invite you, as we explore them, just to think about how they come into your work with schools, where you notice them, where you see them within your practice. We're going to start with safety first, and there are a number of reasons for that. We're aware of the research that speaks to safety as the foundation for higher order psychological processes and growth. And we're not going to show you Maslow's hierarchy of needs because you'll all be well familiar with it. But interestingly, in the stories that we heard through connecting with school communities, this theme arose prominently and frequently when joining to hear about factors that were influencing wellbeing. So we all know that in order to learn, we need to be able to be curious. And importantly, in order to be curious, we need to feel safe. But more than this, safety has a real bearing on some of the practicalities of school life because it influences things like attendance and engagement. At its most basic level, if a pupil doesn't feel safe in their school community, they're not going to attend. If a staff member doesn't feel safe, they'll be looking for other employment. And if a parent doesn't feel safe, they're unlikely to connect with the offers from a school community. And so opportunities for positive wellbeing within schools are lost. So when we think about the stories relating to safety, one thing we noticed is that they tended to fall into 3 distinct areas that we consider as being of equal importance. So they're exemplified in the quotes from the pupils in front of you there. The 3 areas being physical safety, emotional safety, and relational safety. One of the things we've been quite mindful of in our explorations of safety, and why we've chosen to flag the different types of safety that emerged from the thematic analysis, is that as professionals, we might have a bit of an attentional bias towards one type of safety over the others. So as you have a look through these and connect with the quotes, it might just be useful to be curious about which type of safety you're most drawn to notice within your practice, and how you might bring the others into more conscious awareness when working with school communities.
We also heard the importance of the need to feel that you belong, expressed through many of the stories and experiences that were shared. Many of the young people and school staff that we met compared their experiences of school as feeling like a home or being part of a family. Schools were more than just a school. They were, people were talking about them as a community. So the theme of feeling like you're part of something, that you truly belong and feel connected to your school community, appeared central to the experience of well-being in schools. And these were enacted in so many ways, both large and small. What we came to understand is that a sense of belonging is created through relationships. Belonging doesn't occur in isolation. It grows when schools place a value on relationships. It's also a theme about feeling seen, about seeing representations of yourself through the community. In terms of tomorrow's teens, we were talking about this when we presented at the conference. We were also reminded of the value of holding in mind some of the developmental changes that occur during the adolescent years in terms of social identity. So this is really important for us when we think about whole school communities and whole school clusters and a young person's school career. One significant transition that occurs is a shift from your sense of self and sense of belonging being primarily influenced by familial influences to being more heavily influenced by your peer group as you get older. This perhaps raises an important question for us to hold in terms of how requests for support are raised for young people in school communities. It's often from concerned adults in the system, and this has led us to wonder about the potential in utilising peer networks, both in the noticing of need and in the supporting of it, something that is arguably central to a whole school approach.
Alongside that, we heard multiple stories actually that spoke to the importance of a sense of agency within school communities. Agency being the experience of having a voice that you believe will be listened to within your community. It's really about feeling heard, being noticed, and feeling valued. And we know that being listened to and seeing the impact of this is associated with positive well-being for individuals and communities. And it's also considered that the experience of agency develops character and the ability to participate in productive discussions. So it promotes key skills such as responsibility, collaboration, teamwork, and leadership. So therefore, individuals who experience agency contribute to a strong sense of community within schools. And we see agency develop and present in different ways across the child development trajectory. So in the early years, we see agency over objects enacted in children's play. We see it within cause and effect play and in components of parallel play. In our primary school children, agency develops more of an interpersonal quality, and we might see this expressed in opportunities to join social groups, to develop interests and hobbies that support the development of the self in relation to others. In secondary school pupils, agency is characterised by the drive to show our own identity, perhaps simple things like customising uniforms. We see it in elements of risk-taking, but importantly also for secondary school pupils, the experience of agency promotes the development of active adulthood. It fosters a sense of being able to put your own stamp on the world around you, really. So if your school environment has been one that supported a sense of agency, then the result is a group of individuals who have internalised a belief that their contributions to the world around them matter, and who therefore might be more likely to take active roles in having a voice and promoting change across the context of their adult lives. So a key element of agency is the value that we place upon pupil voice. Pupil voice provides pupils with the opportunity to become involved in how and what they learn. It gives them a real say in the issues that affect them and allows them to make positive contributions towards the development of their school and grow into active members of a democratic society.
So efficacy was another theme that was prominent for us, and you can see some quotes from some of the people that we met here, and aligning for us with lots of Albert Bandura's work into self-efficacy. But essentially a school context that promotes efficacy communicates a belief in a person's ability to have positive control over their motivations, over their behaviours and their social environment. So at schools, this is exemplified in opportunities such as having choice and having involvement in decision making. A school that promotes efficacy is a context that communicates support to achieve your goals, and where having goals are encouraged and nurtured. So from the stories that we heard, two elements of efficacy emerged that align for us with the psychological literature. And you can see a kind of illustration of this in the slide that we have here. But essentially, collective efficacy was something that felt quite important. So we heard about a shared belief that members of the community have the capability, responsibility, and resources to advance the school community, and that this is encouraged. So schools are at the heart of communities, and this idea of collective efficacy can be seen across the parts of the systems. So in terms of things like parent groups, in staff teams, and in the school community, for example. So working with this sense of collective efficacy within school communities would actually become really essential for the Gwent Whole School Approach team when considering embedding a whole school approach to wellbeing and the importance of having everybody on board. We also think it's kind of future oriented. So when we think about school leavers, it's likely that some will become the future parents at the school or the next generation of education staff. And so there's a real idea about fostering a sense of collective efficacy over the environment during school years serves to nurture the future growth of the community as a whole. It's once again about seeing the individual as existing within the wider system as a part of the village, if you like. And then there's this idea of self-efficacy, and I've already mentioned that's come from predominantly from Bandura's work. And he describes that as self-efficacy allowing an individual to produce their own future rather than having it simply foretold. So when we think about tomorrow's teens, the development of efficacy is vital to supporting young people into adulthood. And interestingly for us, but importantly perhaps, as you can see within the blue diagram at the bottom, much of the research exploring the effects of teacher collective efficacy have found that as collective efficacy increases, so for example, successes and support within the school's staff team, student achievement and sense of efficacy also increases in parallel.
Now, it perhaps shouldn't be surprising that love and care being expressed within communities came up as something central to emotional well-being. However, we as a team noticed a bit of a challenge to the use of the term love within educational contexts. And it's fair to say we debated using the word and even expanded the heading of the section to be love and care rather than just love on its own. However, what we heard consistently through the stories was just how important it is for young people to feel that they are loved, that they're lovable and cared for. It makes a real difference and potentially opens up important dialogues within school systems that we may be likely to miss or less comfortable in having because they've not been conventionally taking place within those contexts. So we heard about specific ways that love can be demonstrated within schools. So it might be in showing members of the community that they're valued. It might be that we show them that they're loved and lovable by holding them in unconditional positive regard, by seeing them in a good light, regardless of how they've come to school that day or where they're at. And within these stories, we also heard about the importance of a more pedagogical love, which we also see in the literature. and reflects a specific teaching attitude consisting of trust in pupils' learning capacities and the desire to help pupils improve their abilities and talents. But we also heard that love is shown through boundaries within schools, through having clear rules, and by the adults within school communities being able to remain strong and calm and reflective, to show love by staying with a child's intense feelings in difficult moments. As a team, we've really held in mind the newness of putting love front and centre of our thinking about wellbeing within school communities. But as we've heard the importance of this over and over again within the stories, we see this as a really exciting part of our work in joining with school communities, asking them, how do we show love here? How do you show love to the members of your school community?
So we mentioned that the first part of the work was the connection with our school communities, from which our 5 elements of wellbeing were identified, and we've just spoken to you a little bit about those. Our task, once we'd done that as a team, was to consider how we could work alongside interested schools to embed these across the whole school. A number of further principles became important to us as the next stage of the project developed, working with school clusters to develop their own whole school approaches. And it's fair to say, I think, that many of these are still in the process of development. But we just wanted to share some of our thinking so far. Certainly, though, what we've come to understand is that we are learning from every school community that we're joining, and this is serving to shape the work of the Gwent Whole School approach to wellbeing. We've recognised that this work begins with values. The journey towards a whole school approach begins with something central, something held at the heart of the community, an idea of purpose, often defined by the values that are held. The first conversations with schools are about just that. What school values do you have? Who knows about them? And how are they enacted here? The work at this stage is in supporting schools to reconnect with the values that they may already hold, or with values that may be unspoken in the system, or even not known about or shared by all. Some schools want to begin by redefining their values, but from a place of shared and explicit value, it feels like a momentum towards a whole school approach can really emerge.
Alongside that, promoting curiosity has felt like a really important principle for us to hold in mind in our work. We're not joining school communities as experts. We want our curiosity to inspire curiosity within the system, as ultimately we really believe that it will be curiosity that drives the creation of a whole school approach to emotional wellbeing. So as a team, we've reflected on some of the challenges of training models that convey an expert transmission of knowledge to schools. We've wondered how this enables true curiosity within the system. And we've also wondered whether this might take some of the power away from schools to reflect on the needs of their community and ultimately to see themselves as experts with valuable, if not the most important contributions to make. So we've chosen to use a model called the spiral of inquiry to promote these conversations within school communities and identify areas for learning and action in relation to wellbeing. This model offers a really clear beginning with simple and accessible questions asked to everyone, designed to give the best sense of what's going on and to start that cycle of curiosity. It's as simple as sitting down next to people in the yard and asking, what's wellbeing like in this school?
One of the principles that we've held from the very beginning is this idea of school communities as being unique. That has moved us towards not wanting to create an off-the-peg wellbeing approach, but something that's responsive to the individual needs of each community. Charlotte just mentioned the spiral of inquiry, which is the inquiry model that we've used. Amongst many other things, it exemplifies for us how a movement towards a whole school approach to wellbeing is never actually fully achieved. It keeps going, it keeps developing to match the way that the needs of our school communities change. Importantly also for us, and because of the stories that we heard across Gwent, it's not a one-size-fits-all well-being prescription for a school community. The spiral helps us take a journey into a true understanding of the specific needs and experiences of that school community in terms of well-being at that time. As a team, we felt an importance of joining with school communities whilst holding our own experience and knowledge as applied psychologists just to one side and joining in an open and an interested way so that we can see that the uniqueness of the community in front of us, and so that we don't begin with theoretical or research-based assumptions about what's going on in the community and what they need. It's really important for us that the community of the experts, and our task as a team is to enable those voices.
So in asking these questions, in enabling these voices, we can't underestimate the importance of ensuring that they're asked to everyone, that everyone has the opportunity to contribute to the development and lived experience of a whole school approach to wellbeing. There's a reciprocity to wellbeing that emphasises community. We know that when the wellbeing needs of parents and carers are met, for example, it has a positive impact on the wellbeing of the child. And research suggests that this is the same for school staff. It really is about everyone in the system. When contexts have wellbeing needs at the centre of their thinking, then everyone who falls has the potential to be caught.
So you'll already be picking up a theme of the voices of the community running through these principles. And we want to, one of the principles is about how we enable voices. This principle for us became so closely aligned with the 5 principles of wellbeing. It's what we talk about when we talk about agency. It's what we talk about when we talk about efficacy. And we know that a sense of belonging comes from holding shared stories within a community. For the team and the schools that we work with, this is about embodying the principles of well-being within the journey towards a whole school approach itself. Importantly, it's not just about giving space to the voices that are often heard, those that are easiest to access, or those that confirm what we think we already know. It's about creating opportunities for voices that are representative of the entire community and the systems within and around the school. Our work as a team with the schools needs to feel safe. It needs to acknowledge that sometimes the act of asking or inquiring can bring answers that we might not want to hear or that we didn't expect. But this needs to be framed as one of the key conditions for growth and for development of a school community. There's also a pragmatic challenge to the schools and to the team and to the process at this stage of the work, which is about creating the time and the space to achieve this. But we know that when we get this right, it connects to the sense of agency that we discussed earlier. A collective agency across the whole school, where everyone experiences how their voice contributes and makes a difference. It's the difference, we think, between being heard and really feeling heard.
So later on then, the inquiry process that we've been using as a team introduces a learning phase that connects school communities with opportunities to develop their thinking and understanding from the inquiry process so far. So importantly, it connects the work of the inquiry to a wider professional community around the school and really reflects the ethos of it takes a village. It models the understanding that in order to create meaningful and sustainable developments around whole school approaches to wellbeing, particularly within such complex systems as schools, we need the whole village on board. We need the whole village accessible. So in our work, this has been realised through informed requests from school communities for specific training offers, but also through the recruitment of services or interventions that are coherent with what have been identified through the inquiry process. So importantly, it ensures that the wider professional community benefits through a further learning of the unique needs of that school community at that particular time.
Which of course brings us to coherence, the last of the principles occupying us for now in our pilot process, and probably the aim of how a whole school approach is to be experienced. So the inquiry model that we have used, the spiral of inquiry, is characterized by a series of stages in a spiral design. The process aims for coherence through the initial stages of inquiry, linking through to what may need to be learned and what can be done or tried as a result. It means that any requests for help to outside agencies are coherent with the aims of the particular whole school approach to wellbeing for that school community. This is different perhaps to just adding on interventions that may feel like a series of unconnected parts rather than a whole if we're not careful. The other corresponding aim in relation to coherence would be how it's experienced by all of those in the community. Does it actually feel coherent? The mark of a truly whole school approach to wellbeing is that it touches every part of school life. So you see and experience it as much in a maths lesson as you may do when seeking support from a member of staff during a period of difficulty.
And that point really brings us to our final reflection, to one last key message that we've learned from listening to our school communities and from sitting alongside them through these inquiry processes. We saw that schools are places that facilitate thousands of small moments of safety, of belonging, of agency, of efficacy, and of love every single week. And there's real power in bringing these into the thoughtful awareness of the system, to quote one of our young people, because it really is the little things that make a big difference. But before we finish, we're going to hand back over to the voices that have informed so much of our thinking and so much of our understanding about wellbeing within school communities, so that you can hear directly from the people who have had such influence on the Gwent Whole School approach to emotional wellbeing pilot.
In the whole school approach in Gwent, we see emotional well-being as something which is for everybody. So it's not just about the mental health needs of the small percentage, it's about the emotional health and well-being of the whole school community.
There's over 500 people in the school and I still felt like I was one of the important ones when I had the attention.
Wellbeing is at the heart of everything we do. We deal with people, we work with children, with small people every day, but we also work with the staff in the school. And you're only going to get the best out of the children if the staff feel they have high levels of well-being and they enjoy and feel rewarded in what they're doing.
Mr. Davis took me to his classroom and he told me some very funny stories which made me feel very relaxed and calm when I was down in the dumps.
When I feel upset, the teachers ask me what's wrong and they are always there to help me.
And just seeing Miss Banton with a smile on her face herself was really positive for me.
Unless children feel happy, unless they feel valued and liked and contented, we're never going to start getting close to the potential that they can achieve. There's not many people, if any at all, who feel down, upset, fed up, disliked, disgruntled, unhappy, but still they really perform really well and they give everyone else what everyone else needs all the time. It just doesn't work like that. So unless we get the well-being right, everything else really is never going to fall into place. It's such an important thing.
I don't worry about them at all, and I think that's, as a parent, that's the best thing that you can hope for.
I feel like people care about me because whenever I fall, they always pick me up.
The school gives us a voice. We can talk to people. We can voice anything. We can talk about our problems. We can talk about anything that we have wrong.
There's always someone to help you. This school is actually like a home.
It feels like a family to me.
There's something about the magic, I think, that gets created in a school where everybody's well-being is really attended to.